Hello, this is Julia again, doing a Next.js tidification tutorial now. This is going to be a no BS, quick, in and out example of how you can get an existing project and add tide authentication, encryption, and decryption. Hopefully we can do this in under half an hour. We'll see. So, to start off with, this is Platypus Passwords, a password manager with actually zero security, and I will show you what it looks like real quick. npm run dev. Oops, cd platy ls cd platy. Now npm run dev. Next, first npm install. Amazing. Let's open up Chrome. Localhost 3000. Cool. So this button, this get started button, doesn't actually do anything right now. It doesn't start anything. It will be the login button later. But the way we actually add passwords to Platypus Passwords is we put in the I think user equals Julio. It's a fact that we got to put in home first. Yes, and then from here we can add as many passwords as we want, and we can view the passwords. These aren't encrypted or anything, and you will notice that we just fetch the passwords through an API that is completely and utterly open. This one. See? You can fetch anything. And then say switch users, so switch contexts to John. And do CCC. I can just fetch John's information as well from here without any authorization whatsoever. And all the passwords are stored in plain text on the database, which is just an SQL database. So yeah, the point is this system can support multiple users, but absolutely no authentication. The context is provided just through the user query variable, and all the APIs are completely open, right? Kind of sucks. So we're going to tidify it. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is download the template. This is one of the best ways to tidify a product, because the template, you know, it works, right? It is here. Then create the Next.js template, get your documentation. Amazing. There's my face. Prerequisites, first thing you gotta do is run the TideCloak server. And to run the TideCloak server, we will open up a Debian instance. And we will go to cd platy 3, ls, cool. First thing we want to do is clone this. So, pull it, because it does update quite frequently. Can't say frequently. There we go. Sweet. So image is up to date. Amazing. Now we can run the TideCloak server. This is going to be the IAM that our app, Platypus Passwords, is going to use to manage all the users and handle everything to do with the users, right? Cool. And again, I'm not going to go too much into how to run this TideCloak server because it's been done in another video, but I can show you that it is definitely being run in my Docker desktop, just here, and yes, it is there. To triple check that it is most certainly running, we can go to localhost 8080 and log in with username and password. Sweet, that's it. There we go. Amazing. So it is 100% running. Now we can go back to TideCloak.js, now that our TideCloak service is certainly running. Go here. It should make it, but we just get the prerequisite. Cool. And then we're going to call this template, because we're going to get parts of the template and then put it into our app, right? Platypus passwords. We're not going to actually get platypus password stuff and put it into the template. Do you get what I mean? So yeah. Because the template will have authentication and all that set up. All we need to do is transfer those authentication modules, things, to Platypus Passwords. Platypus Passwords is a TypeScript application, from what I remember. .ts, yes. Is our TideCloak server running? Yes. The URL's default. We can create, we'll call it Platy. We can call it my client. Next.js runs default on localhost 3000. Just admin, password, email to manage your Tide license. Do you agree to the terms and conditions? Of course. Ready to initialize TideCloak? Yes. Cool. It's now doing all that stuff for us. Sweet. Cool. Click on this invite link. Whoops. Here it is. Now, what you're going to want to do is to link your actual Tide account, right? So if you don't have a Tide account, you can just create one with create an account. But I've already got a Tide account, so I'm just going to link my Tide account. Yeah, this is the actual production network, you know, so this is going to be like a single sign-on to any application that uses Tide, right? So don't create multiple accounts, just create one Tide account ever for all vendors. If you see this page, create an account once, you know. Cool, account was updated. So now that we've completed the initialization script, we can just quickly stop. I just paused Platypus Passwords so we can run the Next.js app and see that it is certainly running. Just give it a second. Cool. Now let's go to localhost 3000 again. Keep in mind this is the Next.js app because I stopped Platypus Passwords. Now this is the Next.js template app. We can click login, and since there's only one user signed up, which was me before, the admin, I'll just log in with my information. Cool, and I'm in. I can verify the token, and I can log out. That's it. That's all the template app is, right? Amazing. So, what do we want to do now? Now, we want to stop the template app because we don't need it running anymore. We want to open up the template app. We can put it there. And then, oops. And this, and put it on the side as well. So, what we're going to do now is, this is, you could say, chapter 1, where we get the things required for authentication from the template app and move them over to Platypus Passwords so that Platypus Passwords can authenticate users against the TideCloak instance. The important parts from the template, which we need to know, are TideCloak.json, which describes how this app or how the TideCloak.js SDK should interact with the TideCloak instance. So it says like which realm the client is part of, what the URL of the TideCloak is, and obviously the public key of the realm on that TideCloak instance. That's configuration. We'll also need the redirect page. And also, where is it? We'll need this TideCloak provider config. Right. And that's about it. First thing we want to do is go to the layout.tsx of Platypus Passwords. I need to go to the root layout And I need to get TideCloak provider and supply config, which includes tc config from TideCloak.json. So the first thing is we gotta get TideCloak.json, copy it, and put it in platypus passwords. Now remember, it's okay for us to copy it like this because these clients share the same URL, which is localhost 3000. If the URLs were different, we'd actually update it on the TideCloak instance for that client. You know. Cool. So we added TideCloak.json. Then we lay out the TSX. Import tc config. From here. And then we also need TideCloak provider from at TideCloak/Next.js. So npm install this first because platypus passwords doesn't have it. Cool. Added 6 packages. And then just do an import. Cool. And then inside the body, we would just want to replace the body with this, or it's not required. Cool. Just replace it with that. And that should be sweet. This TideCloak provider will handle the authentication on the client side, on the browser side of your application. And we'll also need this redirect page. This redirect page is basically one place where all the users will be redirected to once they've authenticated. From here, you can do whatever you want. You can redirect the user to the dashboard page, the home page. It doesn't really matter, but we decided it was best to give the developers the option or the usability to do whatever they want with this page, which is why we make the developer implement it, or just copy and paste it. Doesn't really matter. This one will just redirect the user to the /home directory. So we do the same thing on platypus passwords. So we go create a new folder called auth/redirect. Paste page.tsx there. Cool. And that's about it. We don't want to change anything from this page.tsx for now. This is just standard implementation. The last thing we need to do, I'm pretty sure, is connect the get started button to initiate the login flow. So we can just go and grab that login button, which is a page.tsx, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, cool. Add a button and on click, do the login. Right? We have the same thing on platypus passwords, where we've got the get started button, and we just want to connect it to a function called onLogin. For onLogin, we need use TideCloak. So we're gonna import use TideCloak. Gonna need to use client. I'm doing use client here because it's also there. Then okay, then on login. Guessing we need to also import use callback. And then we also want this function as well, which is basically if the user is already logged in, we just want to redirect them straight to the home page. We don't want them to log in again. And we need the use effect from React for that. We also need the router. Yeah, so if authenticated, which is provided by the TideCloak.js instance, just push the user to /home. And then just connect the button to the onLogin function. Cool. And that should be it. Let's do npm run dev, see if it's working. I don't know. So this was the Next.js app. This was Platypus. Oh, this still is Platypus passwords. We can see what happens. Cool. So click get started. Oh, it takes us straight to the org page, right? The login flow. Let's say I'll log in. Sweet. And it worked. So it took me to the /home page, but again, the way Platypus passwords was working was that you would put the context as question mark user equals username. We haven't configured that part yet, right? The Platypus passwords takes the context from that, but now the context should be coming from the token itself, because the token is going to have validated, or you could say certified, information about this user that was signed by TideCloak. So instead of getting the context of this session from the URL, we now want you to switch it to getting the context from the token. So that's the next part we're going to do. You could say chapter 2. So now we're going to do that then. The way we retrieve stuff from the database was in the API folder, in the route. So it was here. And it got the user from the search params, which is wrong when you think of it. Like, there's absolutely no security. What we now want to do instead is we want to fetch the user data from the token that's provided as well, because we now have the token. The standard way of getting a token from an API request is in the bearer header of the HTTP request. You can see in the template it gets request.headers that get authorization, and then get the bearer, and it's also got the verified TideCloak token function, which is gonna do a signature validation on your token to make sure no hacker changed anything from the token, or that it came from an unknown source, right? So we're going to be doing that. Since we're going to need to get the user from the token in multiple functions, like the post, the get, and the delete, I'm just going to make another function down here, export async, called get user. And get user will basically look through the request, find the token, and return the user for the function, or throw an error if anything went wrong. So we're gonna, for now, just copy all this. We will need verified TideCloak function, next request, get db, tcconfig. So request. So get user request. Get the auth header, set bearer, return Next.json. Yep. Token. Yep. We validate the token. Get the user from that verification. If the user doesn't exist or an error, that's right. But then, instead of this, we want to return the user. Return user. Cool. And you can see the user values in the token. The user is just a JSON object, basically, of the payload, the token payload. Okay, cool. So if there's an error, it's going to return the next response. And if there's no error, it's going to return a user. Amazing. So what we want to do now instead is, instead of search params, we are going to get the user from await get user. And then instead of if new user is found, we're going to do if user instance of next response which means there's an error, we're going to return user. Does that work? No, it doesn't work. So yeah, I know this looks a little weird, but if this returns a next response, it means there's an exception thrown. But if this returns an object, it means there was no exception thrown, and we're sweet. Where user equals user.void. So user.void is the unique identifier of this user in the Tide network. We can also use other identifiers like sub, but for simplicity, I'm just going to use void. Cool. So got the passwords, and then Next.js response return passwords. Sweet. We do the same thing for this one. If not user, missing name of value. We don't need this check. And then, as before, we do user.void because that's the user's ID. And we do the same thing for delete. Import get user from route. Now the ID from the search params we'll keep because we need that. Don't need this. And again, the user ID is user.void. Amazing. So now all the APIs are protected with this getUser function, which does the token verification and returns the user information if everything's sweet. If nothing's sweet, it's going to throw an exception, which is going to be a Next.js response. We're still using the old method of putting the user in the URL. We don't pass the token in the bearer authorization header. We need to go to our client. We need to go to our client on Platypus Passwords, which is at home page. Cool. And in this fetch, which fetches the passwords, which gets the passwords, adds passwords, and deletes passwords, we need to get the token and add it as part of this request. The template also shows you how to add the token as part of the request, where it shows you right here. So we need to get the token, and to get the token, you need to use an effect for this. We don't need all of this, we only need some of it. But first thing we need is this, use TideCloak. And we don't need the logout, get value from ID token, or has realm role. We only need the token. Instead of doing a use effect on the user, which is how Platypus Passwords used to do it, we're going to do a use effect on the token. So when the token changes, we're going to want to fetch the passwords again. But since the token might change to being null or nothing, we're going to do a quick condition saying if the token does exist, then we execute the fetch. And obviously, like I said before, we don't get the user context from the URL anymore, so we can just remove this entire part. So we just want to fetch API passwords, but like the template, we now want to add the headers. Did I do this right? So, fetch the API passwords with the token as a bearer token in the authorization header, and then just return the passwords, and then run the set passwords function. Cool. And we're going to need to do that for the other, all the other fetches as well. Any fetch that interacts with the API/passwords API, we'll need to add the token. So for this one, we'll also need to add the authorization bearer token. So we're gonna add it here like that. Remove password, same thing. Oh, and as before, we remove the context, the user from the URL, because again, we get the user information from the secure token now. Authorization. Did I do that right? I need to add headers first. Headers. Cool, token. Cool, and I can see the errors here. It's saying allowed role is not defined. Sweet, sweet, sweet. Cool, cool. For this we can just remove it. We don't want to check any roles in the token, we just want to validate the token for now. And sweet, we added the token to all the API endpoints, all the clients. So token, and there's a token there as well. Cool. We can see if it works. Amazing. So it looks like this worked. You can see the user is isn't in the URL anymore. It's now being fetched, or the user data is being retrieved from this token, which is being validated by the Next.js backend. We can look inside the contents of this token by going to gwt.io, and we can see, yeah, it's got the Tide user key, name, user homework, just all this information about my user. But this is secured by the Tide network and by TideCloak. So that's a strength, right? That's why you want to get user information from something that's cryptographically verified, not just from the URL. I can't just fetch passwords from here. See? Unauthorized, missing, or invalid token. Before, I'd be able to just fetch it for any user in the system. But now, I can't. Cool. So now Platypus Passwords has Tide authentication and user management implemented. The last thing to do is to implement encryption and decryption on Platypus Passwords so that the passwords which are saved aren't stored in plaintext. But we also don't want to hold the key for those encrypted passwords, which is why Tide will manage the decentralized encryption and decryption of the passwords so that you don't have to store the key, so that you aren't going to be a victim of a hack. So, implementing encryption and decryption. That's the last step. This is also covered in the template tutorial. Encryption decryption is very simple. It's literally just two functions, do encrypt and do decrypt. All you gotta know is what these tags mean. So since different types of data hold different obviously types of data, like a passport is something that's much more you could say sensitive to decrypt over something as simple as just some random family photo. Say a junior user in the system is able to decrypt all family photos, and that's all we want to allow them to do. We don't want them to do anything else, just decrypt family photos. But there are also passports in the system. We don't want this junior admin to be able to decrypt all of our users' passports, because that's quite a sensitive document. So we don't want to let this junior admin be able to decrypt all these highly sensitive passports, which is when these tags come in. When we encrypt a piece of data, we add a tag to it. So these tags aren't enforced at the data level. Like, you can encrypt anything you want inside this data variable, and you can assign any tag you want. But the point is that these tags are going to be linked back to the token, because the Tide network will check that every user that wants to encrypt or decrypt a piece of data associated with a specific tag has that tag in a role. So the junior admin in the system I was talking about before will only be able to encrypt the family photo tag because he has a role in his token called family photos. It's got some other stuff in there, but it's basically just family photos. The higher admin, though, that can decrypt passports will have another role another role specified in his token called passports. The Tide network enforces that someone requesting to decrypt this piece of data must have the tags that are specified within this piece of data in their roles. It's a little confusing, so I'm going to show you how it's done with a new piece of data, which includes also setting up the role on TideCloak, because we'll need to set up a new role in TideCloak for passwords. We don't have a passwords tag/role yet. Anyways, I'll show you how it's done. So we want to encrypt and decrypt the data on the client side, not on the backend, because on the backend, anyone's got, the administrator has access to this data if it's on the backend. The strength of Tide is that we can enforce a layer of authorization that's so fine-grained that not even the admin can see the passwords of a user if they don't allow the admin to see it, because it's going to be the user on this browser that has a token and the encrypted data, and then going to request to the Tide network saying, hey, can you decrypt this piece of data? This is my attested token. And in this token, I have the role passwords, which means I can decrypt my password, not anyone else's password. That's a very important thing as well. I can only decrypt my password. I'm not going to get too much into it. Okay, I'm just going to show you how to do it. So, first thing we want to do is encrypt the passwords. So when we send them up with the add password, so name, value, we want to encrypt the value. Equals, we want to import do encrypt, which is provided in use TideCloak. So await do encrypt. Another very important part, which I should state, that you are passing an array. Okay, you can see the array brackets outside here, because you can encrypt and decrypt multiple pieces of data at the same time. Okay, like I said, we need to make this an array like that. Cool. And data is the new value, and tags is a string array of just password. So yeah, it's just the password. That's the only tag we need to provide. We need to associate with this piece of data. Now, instead of sending the new value, we want to send the encrypted password. And we want to call this function inside here, so that's protected behind this check. So when add password gets executed, assuming new name and new value, so the password name and password value have values, we're going to encrypt the password value, assign it the tag password, and then send it up in the API passwords with the encrypted passwords. Do encrypt returns an encrypted array. Because we're able to encrypt and decrypt multiple pieces of data at the same time, do encrypt and do decrypt returns multiple pieces of data. All I gotta do is get the first. Whoops. I need to get the first object from the doEncrypt function. Since I'm only passing one piece of data to encrypt in the doEncrypt function, I should expect only one data to be returned. Cool. So this means when I go to Platy, user has not been given any access to password. That's exactly what I told you was going to happen before, and it just happened. My token doesn't have the password tag, which means the Tide network won't allow me to encrypt a piece of data with the tag password to it. So what I need to do is I need to go to my TideCloak instance, find my realm, Platy, go to the security admin console. So this is where the admins go to manage. Cool. I can view my user called admin. See my roles. I'm a Tide realm admin, and I've got the default roles for Platy. I now want to create a new default role for Platy called password, because any user who accesses my system should be able to encrypt and decrypt their own passwords. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to create a realm role, and we can see there's already a template one here as well for date of birth. But again, since we're not using the tag name DOB, it's not going to work. We need to create a new one with password. So create role. All you need to do is prefix it with _Tide_. Then you need to do the tag name, which is just password, and then a dot self encrypt. There are going to be other types of encryptions in the future, like other encrypt, where another person is able to encrypt or decrypt your data. But for now, it's just self encrypt. Cool. Now we want to create another one for decryption. Otherwise, the user will only be able to encrypt their passwords, but never decrypt their passwords. So this will allow a user to decrypt their own password. Cool. Now we go to the default roles of Platy, and we assign a role. We want to go by realm roles. Password self-encrypt and password self-decrypt. Sweet, we can see they're both drafts. This is now where the IGA comes in. I'm not going to explain what the IGA is because it's a massive thing, but just know that there's a governance module activated on TideCloak where me as the Tide admin, I have to approve of it. This prevents someone just, with access to the TideCloak server being able to approve their own roles. This basically means I need the Tide realm admin, which is my cryptographic approval, so that the Tide network can say, yes, this type of user has this type of role. Alright. Just go to change requests, roles, and we can see that the role is a default user context for the my client, and this is the role, password self-encrypt. Review it. Should log in again. Change request, admin related, no realm, yep. And we can see that we are adding the password self-encrypt role. Once it's approved, since I'm the only Tide realm admin, I then need to commit it. But if there were multiple admins, we'd need a threshold approval to be able to commit it. Sweet. Same thing for the other role. Commit it. Cool. That means any tokens issued now will have the updated password self-encrypt and password self-decrypt roles. Which means if I reload this page, and I test it again, it works. This little page here, which just showed up, is a way for us to bypass browsers' extremely tight security with trackers. Since the Tide token that's issued to a user is linked to a cryptographic key that sits on the browser, we need the browser to allow us to access that cryptographic key that's sitting on the user's browser so that they can use the token, because the combination of the cryptographic key and the token enable the user to communicate with the Tide network. Since browsers have super strict security against trackers, they prevent us from getting those cryptographic keys under the context of the Tide network domain, like the orc1.tideprotocol.com, because advertisers used to be able to track users going between different websites by storing data on their browser. We require that storage so we can access the key, the session key, the cryptographic key I was telling you about before. But since the browser is now preventing it, we need to show this little page here, which becomes a top-level context, which bypasses this tracking, because the tracking only blocks iframes. It's a lot cleaner for this to be an iframe, but we can't make it an iframe because then it gets blocked. So the encryption and decryption requests are actually being processed from this little window here. We can see if we do inspect here, but when I add a new piece of data, it actually went through this little window here. Now, say the user closes this little window, all that's going to happen is the next time they try to encrypt a piece of data, it's just going to pop up again. Because all that happens is you request an encryption and decryption, and say the browser blocks our access to the iframe local storage. It's going to pop up that little window, perform the encryption decryption, and before you know it, it's already done. So by closing it, yeah, it doesn't really change anything. But that's what it is. Don't worry about that little window. You can minimize it, do whatever you want. It truly doesn't matter. That's just so you know why that little window exists. So, getting back into it, remove these. If I add a new one, view that, cool. There we go. So this is the encrypted piece of data. So the key for this encryption doesn't sit with the client, doesn't sit with TideCloak. It exists in this decentralized form on the Tide network. Cool. Now what we need to do is we need to decrypt that piece of data. We only want to decrypt the piece of data when I click on this eye icon. Right. We don't want the user to log in to Platypus passwords and have the browser immediately decrypt, say they have 2,000 passwords, we don't want to decrypt 2,000 passwords. We only want to decrypt the passwords that they want to decrypt, the ones where they click the little eye icon and they want to see it. So we need to implement a functionality where when they click this eye icon, it then decrypts the password for them. So you can see the result is do encrypt. Encrypted value, yep, tags, it's only password, sweet. And it gets the first result. Amazing. Toggle show has been replaced with set show IDs. IDs include some system to show which password to decrypt or whatever. Let's go back to Platypus passwords and see if it worked. If I click the eye icon, it should now decrypt the password for me. And it worked! Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, see? Like that. And let's add a new password. Show. So cool. YouTube. Pass. Show. So cool. And that's it. That's the full tidification of platypus passwords. Thank you very much. I'm glad you were able to sit through this video. And yeah, have a great day.